Can you please go back to the neurons and that dark space, that there is more space in, I missed something there.
Oh, the atoms?
Incredible, the atoms.
Yeah.
Yes.
I've never seen an atom.
Well, I mean,
But I have, and we all have, right? And that's sort of also the mystery of science, is we develop these tools to give us access to see things that we can't actually see, but they still have to get in through our senses. So the basic idea is that, and this is just elementary chemistry. I didn't do very well in chemistry. I'm scared of chemistry, but I did mine from chemistry the cool theological stuff, at least. And one of the cool theological things is that, or at least philosophical, is that an atom, so everything's made up of atoms, right? That's the smallest particle. So think of reality, of material reality, and then keep cutting it up, make it smaller and smaller and smaller. Eventually you're going to get down to an atom. Now apparently there's actually things smaller than atoms, but that starts to get really, really weird. So we'll just stick at atom. We'll just stick at atom. An atom is made up of three basic parts: the proton, the neutron, and the electron. Electrons are things that are basically, orbiting is not the right word because there's no pattern or order to them in their movement. It actually appears to be random, which itself is mind-blowing, because we perceive order, but actually there isn't actually order out in the world. So we're kind of seeing, at least in a physical, strict physical sense. So there must be a spiritual reality holding it all together. We perceive stuff as stable, right? It's not actually that way. So in order for us to act in any way, interact with the world, right? If I were walking around saying, I think there's a floor here, and I feel it, but actually I know that in the atoms that compose this floor, there's more space, there's more absence than there is presence, then I'd say, well, how can I really trust my senses? How can I really do anything at all? So interacting with the world, just getting through our day, requires acts of faith all the time. But this is the point. It's not an arbitrary faith, right? It's not random. It's not like we don't have any reason to believe. It's just recognizing that there's these question marks, there's these ambiguities and mysteries. I'll use that word. I think that's the best word. There's these mysteries just enmeshed all around us all the time. And that the only way we can interact with it is relying upon that faith that precedes reason.
The question I hear for myself a lot of times is people that say they don't have any faith that God exists and that the universe just kind of happened. And I'm saying, well, how is that possible? They don't have an explanation, but they believe it anyway.
Yeah, I think it's a great point. So we're the magical thinkers, right? The religious folk. We're the ones who are engaged in the fairy tales and the myths and the legends and things like that. And then you have people who say, well, I believe that something comes from nothing. I literally believe that. Well, think about that. As we looked at before, I mean, it's actually impossible to conceive. Our minds can't even begin to explain what it would mean for something to come from nothing. Think of just the words, the nouns and the verbs in there. They're all somethings. They're already all existing. So how in the world could there be an existence that actually exists that is not in existence and that also is capable of producing something that's existence? It makes zero sense. Zero sense. It's nonsensical. And yet, religious belief in God in the most basic sense of there being creator, right, before we start packing in all the other characteristics of God, is taken to be in a contemporary culture as the weak belief, as the mystical belief, as the nonsensical belief. That's why I encouraged this last time, and I'm going to encourage it forever and ever, point out the absurdities. It's not fair. You're not fighting fair, right? You're expecting me to give an absolute accounting of every single belief that I have when you at the bottom of your whole system are saying 0 is a 1. 0 and 1, same thing, done. Drop the mic, right? I win this debate. No. Put their feet to the fire. You're right, it doesn't make sense.
What I see is that God knew in the beginning that this was going to happen, that some people would believe in him and some people would not, simply because he gave us free will. Our free will. He has been trying to interact with human beings since Adam and Eve.
Yeah.
And even they fell. So he has had this relationship, and yet he understands. That's the reason why just in the gospel a few days ago, when Jesus said that there was going to be a separation, that he had come for fire, and that some people were going to be against mothers and against daughters and daughters again, because of the fact that he gave us free will, and people are going to just rely on themselves and not realize that God is what they have to rely on.
Yeah, it's the, I guess well put, it's always an invitation. It's always an invitation. And insofar as it's invitation, belief cannot be compelled. That's another one of these crazy ideas that I hear all the time, is that Christians are trying to force people like to put their religion down their throat. And it's like, where are you getting this stuff? Like, honestly, maybe they'll pick out some sort of, like a few cherry-picked examples from history, which are blatantly un-Christian in terms of their actual content, right? It's always been understood, and it's theologically necessarily the case, given the whole body of the content of the faith, that it's a free relationship. Now, the relationship is free, and we can say yes or no, but there's still a kind of structure and order to it, right? And that's this idea that there's a form of atheism, which is a kind of nihilism, which means that there's an absolute nothingness, and insofar there's an absolute nothingness to reality. I can will and choose whatever I want to will and choose. And that's sort of the power that I give to myself. For those of you who study a little bit of philosophy, maybe Friedrich Nietzsche is sort of at the heart of that view of reality. God is dead, reality. And so we must create ourselves as God. But there's a great irony in all of those forms of atheism, because in order to say no to God, there must be an existence that pre-exists you. And not only an existence that pre-exists you, but an existence that has a particular order and character to it. So that, for example, you know what no means, and you know what, or purportedly you think that you know what the God whom you are rejecting means. And all these other features that we've been talking about, logic and metaphysics, right? All of that pre-exists your radical free no to reality, right, to God. So it's parasitic, right? It's actually sort of an act of great cowardness to say no, because like, I've been giving all these gifts that pre-exist me and that are in me as well, and I'm going to use them to pretend that I am sovereign over myself 100%, that I create my own reality, as it were. It's delusional in a literal sense, and yet it's taken as sort of commonsensical nowadays. But you're right to point that out. It's not only a problem morally, it certainly is a problem morally, but it's a problem on the most basic level of philosophical reflection. If there is nothing, then saying that you reject God is already a something, and you've already disproved your own position.
I have two questions.
Please.
The first question is, did God need or want to create human beings? Why did he create us? And the second question is, since we have free will, when we die, will we continue to have free will in heaven?
Great questions. Come on, ask me something hard. That's a joke. Those are really hard questions. Let me do my best. So the first question, why did God create? That gets into the motives of God, and of course that's going to be dicey territory. But we can at least say this much. God doesn't need. By definition, God doesn't need, because to say that God needs would to say that God lacks. To say that God lacks would mean that there is some other thing out there that would complete God, which means there'd be another God above the God, right? So by definition, God does not lack. So whatever motive we're going to attribute to God for why God creates, it can't be out of need. The generic answer, but it's a good answer, is out of love. And to give an analogy for how that looks is when you're really happy, like when you're really, really happy about something, say you've received some great news, is your impulse to run to the most darkest, deepest corner of your house and to turn off all the lights and to hide yourself under the covers and to giggle to yourself? No, we want to explode out into the world and tell everyone, right? Or at least somebody. In other words, joy overflows. By nature, joy overflows. We don't want to keep it in. It can't be kept in. It hurts if we keep it in. So love, true love, gives of itself. And if we locate the love within the Trinitarian existence of God between the Father and the Son and the Holy Spirit, and we imagine that as perfect love, then we can get a sense, at least analogically, how that love overflows outside of itself, as it were, to create a reality that is of that God, but also distinct from that God, that then calls that reality back to itself. So it's basically a cosmic love story, is one way of thinking why God creates. The question of free will in death, St. Augustine's really, really good on this one. He distinguishes between what he calls free choice and free will. So free choice for him is what all of us now currently live as sinners. And being free as a sinner is like being an alcoholic standing in front of Bevmo. And we all know what Bevmo is. It's like the Costco of booze, right? It's like it's an airplane hangar full of alcohol. So we can ask, well, is the alcoholic standing in front of Bevmo free? And if he's truly, or she is truly an alcoholic, well, then in one sense, it's like, no, he's going to go in. Why? Because he's compelled. There's something stronger than his own will that has overtaken his will. And as it were, he's forcing himself to walk through that door. He's been held hostage by himself. But think about all the different choices he can make inside of the Bevmo, right? Like, if you look at all the permutations, there are probably millions of different choices he could make. So in sin, we are free, but we're basically free to choose our own poison. And there's lots of different ways to sin. There's lots of different ways to be in love with ourselves, as it were, to be self-idolaters. What free will is for Augustine is when the alcoholic, through the grace of God, is not only able to get up every day and to stop drinking. Now that's a big deal in and of itself, right? To have the willpower to get up every day and to say no. It's to get up one day and forget he was a drunk. Now that's a big deal. Like, that's salvation, that's liberation. Why? If you ever met somebody, or maybe if you've gone through it yourself, who's been addicted to something and now is clean, they can usually tell you, in fact, everybody I know can tell me how many days it's been. Not only years, but how many days. Like, this is my 1,213th day clean. And you're like, God bless you, that's amazing. But think about the burden that they carry, that they know the days since their last drink. So it's still a burden on them. They're fighting it and they're winning, but it's still a burden. Well, what if that person could wake up one day and not even remember, not even think about booze? So it's not like booze and I'm going to fight it, I'm going to fight it, I'm going to fight it, I'm going to fight it. It's gone. That is heaven. That is free will. Free will is understood as finally being free to love. Because all of us right now, wrapped up in sin, we're not fully free to love, because we have all these vines, as it were, pulling us back and holding us from freely, truly giving of ourselves, including of ourselves to ourselves in the right way. Remember, love your neighbor as yourself. Proper self-love. So true free will is being liberated from bondage or slavery to ourselves and to sin. So the answer is yes, there is free will in heaven, but it's the free will to say yes without any impediments anymore.
Do you want to fall in love with God? I'm sure we all want to. The book of Psalms contains the directions. Thousands of years ago, people like you and me talked to God out of the depths of their hearts, revealing an intimate love. Psalms are the expression of the faith in God by people around 3,000 years ago. God was not a mere abstract creator, but was present, involved, and a real person of power and emotions. Now, when we read or listen to the Psalms, we can know the intensity of this love. Entering into the influence of the Psalms, we can find a path to know and love God. To know more about the Psalms, you should get a copy of Father Mike Manning's booklet, the Psalms. It will help you to understand the 150 Psalms better as he has categorized them. He uses the technique of acts: adoration, contrition, thanksgiving, and supplication. Get your copy today and know the categories. Learn to pray with the Psalms.
Call the number on the screen or email us. You can also get it through our website. Get your copy today.
I had a big struggle for the longest time with when I hear many times when I was told, you're so blind just to follow this one leader up there that doesn't even know you, set eyes on you, or talks to you, and you just follow so blindly. And you're just so brainwashed because your priest is the one that is giving you all this information, and you follow and worship all these statues, your idols. And with faith and reason, I knew I had my faith and it was strong. So it would upset me. But I said, I wish I could give you a straight answer, but you were so brainwashed yourself that we're just going to end up in a negative argument. That's how I would kind of get out of it. But now it's a challenge that I think I would be able to handle better, so much better.
Oh, I'm glad. One of the things that can help at least de-escalate those kinds of encounters is just asking questions. So what do you mean by worship statue? What do you mean by brainwash? What do you mean by our priest telling us? Ask for clarification. And usually what you find is we live in a world of these really gross assumptions. These people just swinging these big unwieldy words around and just trying, what are you saying exactly? Be precise. Ambiguity is the tool of the devil. And I really mean that. Now, that doesn't mean that everything is not going to be ambiguous. Some things are genuinely ambiguous because life is hard. But deliberately trafficking in ambiguity creates confusion and prevents your mind from settling on a clear truth. And then once you haven't settled on a clear truth, you can be taken in any direction. So let's not allow for ambiguity. In ourselves as well. I mean, we have to push ourselves to not just have these basic, it's just this way. Why? Don't want to go there. Sounds pretty tough. No, force yourself to actually go down into the basement, your own beliefs. Find that everything actually is in order, which doesn't mean you can't, constantly be making improvements. You can. And then from there, go out into the world. And then when you do get attacked, ask those questions. Ask those questions. What's a statue? What do you mean? What is a statue in your mind? Do you mean an expression of sacramental reality, of matter that God created and that can point back to Him? Well, yeah, that can be an expression of our love for God. Why wouldn't you love the matter that God created, right? So, you can do it. It just takes calmness and patience and a commitment to just constantly be learning, which we can all do. There you go. Here.